Alrighty guys, welcome back to another episode. It's episode 9. We are breaking down the main card of Derek Brunson versus Edmund Shahbazyan, going through our verdict selections and a few bets towards the end. Just to quickly kind of recapping back-to-back poor cards now, I fell into the bottom 40%, only gained 2,421 XP, and yeah, went 3 of 7 on tips, 1 of 4 on underdog selections, and just not a great card. I won't go through and break down all the fights. It was a decent card to watch. The only thing I wanted to say was, for fuck's sake, Gustafsson, so horribly defensive on that sloppy Verdum takedown, and yeah, once it got to the ground, looked like a fish out of water. Right to the bottom of the main card here, Kevin Holland versus Trevin Giles. Kevin Holland's 1.24 times on verdict, and Giles, the underdog, 5.13 times. Holland's 17-5 in his career, and Giles 12-2. To Holland first, he's such a naturally kind of talented fighter and good athlete. He's lanky, 6'3" for the welterweight division, long straight attacks on the feet, and then also dangerous enough on the ground to threaten and compete with higher level guys. He is a finisher as well, 8 wins via knockout and 6 via submission. The biggest thing about Kevin Holland though is he's so untrustworthy. He often lets fights play out where he shouldn't, and you know, the best example of that is kind of playing around with the submission game with Gerald Meerschaert. When he had the ability in that fight to get it standing again, where he obviously had a bigger advantage. So yeah, speaks to his IQ being not so great. Giles, kind of a boring fighter. He never really pushes the pace when he needs to, and he's also kind of a letdown artist alike to Holland. But in my eyes, he's worse than Holland, because in terms of letting us down, he's far less talented and has far less ability, where Holland has that kind of natural athletic gift that he can rely on. And Giles has a terrible gas tank. He always fades, religiously fades. He's been subbed twice in the UFC, both times in the 3rd round, because you know he continues to shoot takedowns. He's a wrestler, but he often gets so sloppy with them, so defensively liable, that he just gives up his neck. His first 2 UFC performances were fairly impressive. He dominated both of those fights, but he hasn't shown that again since competing against a higher level of competition. And this is no easier. Kevin Holland is a good fighter. It's definitely Holland's fight to lose. I think he's better everywhere. My one worry for this fight is Kevin Holland playing around in the clinch game too much, and you know, Giles getting the takedowns. But I think that Kevin's going to be far too busy on the feet, and then you know, threatening on the ground to let Trevin rest, and he'll inevitably gas. And when that happens, you know, I think Holland is going to either knock him out or sub him. In terms of my verdict play, I'm going to play a 2nd round submission as Giles fades out towards the end of that frame. I think Holland will be a massive problem on the feet for Giles, and Giles will just continue to shoot and yeah, eventually give up his neck on a lazy takedown. It's currently paying 17.53 times on verdict as well, even though Kevin Holland is the favourite. So that's a good return there. To the next fight, Lando Vannata versus Bobby Green, the rematch. Vannata is 1.49 times on verdict, and Bobby Green's the underdog at 3.04 times. Vannata 11-4-2 and Green 25-10-1. So yeah, that draw in their first matchup, Lando losing a point and fading late in that fight. Starting with Bobby Green, he's a veteran. His record 24-10-1, very skewed. He's lost a lot of close fights. Almost all of the fights where you know you're left at the end thinking who won that haven't gone his way. And it even forced his retirement a fight or 2 back after taking lots of tough losses. Last fight was his comeback fight. He beat Guida. It was a decision, but Bobby Green is kind of a more decision style fighter. I thought he did win that fight relatively comfortably. And you know, the fact that he could win a kind of decision maybe shows a bit of evolution in terms of his game, pushing the pace enough to get the decision or to get the win, rather than letting it be so close and kind of being on the wrong end of a couple of close ones. Vannata, pretty exciting fighter, hits super hard, loves to come forward, crazy aggression early. However, kind of like it happened in that first Bobby Green fight, it does lead to him gassing, and we see that in his UFC career, 3 UFC decision losses and 2 draws, you know, which speaks to him kind of fading out late. We have seen recently in that Yancy Medeiros fight that he adopted kind of a more disciplined approach in order to conserve the energy, and he still did explode throughout that fight with fast attacks, but it wasn't kind of the Lando that we know so well. That style of fighting as well, that's all well and good, but kind of only in a fight where you get to fight at your pace. You're dictating kind of the pace at which the fight takes place, and Bobby Green won't allow that Bobby Green's always the pace setter in his fights, and the pace is high. Lando has large strike numbers, but Bobby's even higher. And when you're considering that, you also got to look at the defensive numbers, and Bobby's defensive stats are way higher than Lando. Lando will charge in, take one to get one, but Bobby is much better defensively in the stand-up and combines his high output with good head movement, good footwork, and defensively, evasive. Green also is really solid wrestling, both offensively and defensively, and for the most part, his IQ checks out. He fights smart. He's just been unlucky with a lot of decisions. And for all those reasons, I think Green is huge value here. He's pretty durable. He's only been finished twice in his 19 UFC fights, which once was in 2009 against Dan Lauzon, and then in a fight, which was a fight he was winning until he took Dan down and got subbed, and then he got knocked out by Poirier in 2016, which I think that's fine. I think I will allow him that loss. And I think he can survive the wildness of Lando and turn it up on him to win a smartly fought decision, because as likewise to not getting finished, he has only won via stoppage in 4 of his UFC wins, so he's not particularly a finisher in his own right. He could get into trouble a little bit in this fight. He loves to showboat, hands down, and head movement, but for the most part his head movement and defensive footwork is kind of on point enough to avoid any of those big attacks that Lando will present. So that decision's currently paying 4.02 times, and I'll be having a play on that. To the next fight on the main card, we've got Vicente Luque versus Randy Brown. Luque heavy favourite on verdict, 1.13 times, and Randy Brown coming back at 8.93 times. Luque 18-7-1 and Brown 12-3. So as I said, Randy Brown is a huge underdog. I think this fight's way closer than the verdict odds would suggest. Luque is a pretty interesting fighter, plenty of UFC wins, but many of them against mid-tier competition. The same thing with Randy Brown though, but I did just want to flag that as Luque by far the bigger name in this one, but their records are kind of similarly, I don't want to say padded, but lots of their wins are to lower level guys. For the most part, in terms of Vicente's skill set, he loves to get into wars, granite chin, so it does favour him well, but where he beats his opponents is kind of having that brawl mentality while still throwing hands in a much more technical fashion to his opponents, which ends up meaning that his strikes land first. And he does generate so much power and use angles so well to get as much torque kind of into his shots as possible, and that overhand right is like a sledgehammer. He's got lots of highlight KOs with that shot. I don't want to say Luque gasses out because his output can be so high, but he definitely does look sloppier as the fight goes on. But the thing is, he still has power in those later rounds, and he's shown that with late finishes over Barberena, late finishes over Price, and then also dominating that third round against Perry, or dominating the end of that round where he really busted up Perry's nose. And I think drawing similarities between him and Lyman Good in that way, because I thought Lyman Good would gas in as the fight went on against Belal Muhammad in his last, but it didn't, and he didn't gas, and his power carried right through to the last. Where Luque has the biggest problem in his fights is when his opponents kind of won't engage in that war with him or get stuck in the pocket and are instead kind of light enough with their movement and defensively capable to avoid the firefight. And that's kind of exactly how that Wonderboy fight played out, and it's why I played Wonderboy there. And in a way, that is Randy Brown. Obviously, there's levels to this. Randy isn't up there with Thompson, but he is a very defensively sound striker who does move well for 3 rounds, and he's super rangy for 170. He's kind of a Magni type frame, which does make it hard to close the distance on him. What makes it even harder to close the distance is his crisp boxing, and he utilises those straight strikes to further elongate the kind of reach discrepancy that he already has on display. So in terms of this fight, it's really close. I'm kind of torn. Is Brown good enough to avoid Luque's aggressive forward pressure, pick him apart from the outside, or will Luque inevitably get inside and land an absolute bomb? To my pick, I am going to go with the latter. Even though the odds would suggest massive value in Brown, I think Luque will do enough to get in. Luque does rely on his punches a lot, but his kicking game is solid. He lands big numbers to the legs. Particularly if I just take the numbers from his last 3, he landed 37 leg kicks against Nico Price, 42 against Wonderboy, and 35 against Mike Perry. And then if you look at Brown's opponents, with him being so rangy, they always chase the legs because he's so long, and it's a great way to stop his movement. Bilal Muhammad won a decision in their fight, landed 43, and then Brian Barberena landed 21 on Randy Brown. And it's a great weapon, to chop down the rangier guy. And Randy's game plan should be to stay on the move, avoid their opponent, and it's a great way to stop that. And that'll enable Luque to get in, set up one big shot, overhand right, or a flurry of big shots to put Randy down and out. Shortly priced on verdict at 1.86 times. Like I said, Brown, to potentially scrape a decision here at 15.52 times, definitely the value play. But I'm just going to call this main card as I see it, and I'm favouring the Luque knockout. To the co-main, Joanne Calderwood versus Jennifer Meyer. Joanne Calderwood's the favourite at 1.23 times, and then Jennifer Meyer's coming back at 5.33 times. Calderwood is 14-4, Meyer 17-6-1. I won't talk for very long on this co-main. It's a poorly slated co-main. I'm not too excited for it at all. But yeah, Jojo, she's a veteran. Not particularly exciting at all. She does have some good wins and has definitely come up against the better competition. And yeah, she's a volume fighter. She lands almost over 2 significant strikes per minute more than Meyer. And she's also busy enough with her takedowns, landing 1.85 per 15 minutes at a solid clip, 56%, to keep her opponent kind of guessing on which way she's going to come in and what she's going to turn up with on the night. These two do have a common opponent in Chookagian. I think Calderwood was unfortunate to lose that decision. She actually outlanded Caitlin by 30 strikes and secured 3 takedowns to Caitlin's 0. So she had a good showing in that fight, where on the flip side of that, Meyer just couldn't get into a rhythm against Caitlin, struck at 25% and got outpointed on the cards pretty comfortably. In other fights though, Meyer has been impressive. The Modafferi fight, most so. She looks super strong in the clinch in that fight. But Jojo will have the wrestling and grappling advantage in this one, so I think Meyer's clinch work will be nullified in that way. And for me personally, Meyer's a little too one-dimensional. She doesn't threaten takedowns, doesn't really throw kicks or go anywhere but the head with her strikes. And I think Calderwood's been around the block long enough to be able to handle anything that Jennifer is going to throw at her. So yeah, Calderwood to likely outvolume Meyer on the feet, lean on some wrestling to soak up some control time and land some light ground and pound, and cruise to a relatively uneventful decision. It's the way I'm seeing it. It's only paying 1.42 times on verdict. So that's how a bunch of other viewers are seeing this one play out as well. I usually wouldn't tip such a short odds play, but yeah, like I said, this main card I'm going to go with how I see it, and that is how I see it. Main event time, Derek Brunson versus Edmund Shahbazyan. Derek Brunson's the underdog here, a big underdog, 4.75 times, and Edmund's 1.27 times. Speaking to their records, Brunson's 20-7, only lost to really the best, and Shahbazyan 11-0. I think just before we get into it, it's important to mention this fight's only a 3-rounder. It was bumped to the main event last week, sometime after Holland Aldana was removed. So yeah, not a typical 5-round main event. Fight is a little bit closer than the odds indicate. Brunson's a real test and a good challenge. Perennial gatekeeper of the middleweight division, but I do think that Edmund gets the dub here. Brunson is a powerful guy, but he's really wild with his striking. Edmund's a much better boxer, much better kickboxer, and has a really, really high fight IQ, and I would be seriously shocked if Brunson does land a fight-ending shot on him. In terms of wrestling, Brunson would definitely seem to have the edge in that department, but he kind of sucks offensively with it. He more utilises on it defensively, 100% takedown defense. We have seen him plenty of times that he tries first with his hands and then will start to shoot takedowns once he's getting beaten up, and it's often too late then because he's wobbly on his feet, and the Adesanya fight is the perfect example of that. Brunson's definitely at his best and most dangerous in the first, and although Edmund loves to start fast too, and his last 3 UFC wins have all been first round finishes, I think Edmund will need to recognise and be the most careful early in this fight. And I do back Edmund's preparation and IQ to be careful early. For a young guy, he's so well rounded and level headed, and I don't think the height of the moment nor Brunson's wild style early will get him engaging in anything that he shouldn't. He's also really powerful in the striking, and he's more versatile than Brunson with kicks and knees, which will give him another level on the feet. And if it does hit the mat, he also has super strong BJJ. So all in all, I think Edmund takes this one. given the fact that both these guys start fast, it wouldn't surprise me if it was a first round finish. More so kind of Edmund landing a big shot on Brunson on a takedown attempt when he's getting beat up on the outside. But I'm going to play a Shahbazyan decision at 7.41 times. I think Edmund's super smart in there, super impressive for a young guy, and I think he'll recognise Brunson's danger in the first, perhaps coast early, fight on the outside, and potentially even give Derek the first round. But then I think Edmund will work him out, and we'll see him turn up the heat, potentially find a second or third round finish. But if he doesn't finish, I think he definitely wins those rounds and gets a decision win. And this being only a 3-round main event, I think it definitely favours this play. And although it wasn't the best performance ever we've seen by Edmund, he has won a decision in the UFC in his debut against Darren Stewart, so we know he can go the distance. He didn't look great in that fight, that's why I don't really want to draw parallels between that. But in his 3 fights since, he's only shown to evolve and look really good. So yeah, Edmund by a decision, paying 7.41 times. Going to the multi per annum now. We've only hit 1 and we've lost 7, but still a profit of 32.099 units because we're talking high odds here. Always trying to go to 40 to 1 or more. So we hit 1 a year and we profit, and we've already hit 1 this year. So happy to go into the prelims to find some value here to bump up the odds for this bet. I'm playing Rayborg to win by any method. I think he should be too good in that fight. I think he looked much better in his last against Ricky Simone in the stand-up, and then we know he's got that kind of defensive wrestling tenacity to keep getting up or utilise his own takedowns. I think he's a pretty well-rounded fighter, and he seems to be rounding out that stand-up. So I like that. Kevin Holland by finish, like I said, it could be knockout, could be sub. I've got a sub play on verdict. I think that's highly likely, but Holland, super athletic, super dynamic, and I think Trevin Giles gassing is just going to give a finish to Kevin Holland in the end. Bobby Green by points, probably the leg I'm most concerned about. I do think he wins the fight, and he is a points fighter. There's potentially a submission chance there, but of course there's also a chance of Vannata winning that fight, being the favourite. We're going by Luque by KO or points. I do like this bet. I see a lot of people on Randy Brown, which worries me a little bit, but I think Luque, like I said, kind of the two ways I see this playing out is Randy Brown being able to maintain the outside or Luque getting inside, and either finishing. I've gone with the security with the points as well, because there's a chance that Luque doesn't get the finish and chews up the legs and lands big shots throughout the fight without the finish, to win a points fight. And then we've got Calderwood by points as well. I think that fight probably goes a length, and I think Calderwood's just much better everywhere, and that's totally paying $48.52. Not going for a prelim play here either, because I've kind of included Borg in the multi. So yeah, anyway, next card is Derek Lewis versus Alexei Oleinik. It's a decent main card. I see a few underdogs winning on that card, so stick around, and next week I'll hopefully release that sometime. Anybody that stayed this late in the video, appreciate you listening. Give it a like, subscribe to the channel. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's at @it's_tadpole. Keep up with some verdict related content, some betting related content, and then if you want to follow me on verdict, it's at ItsTadpole as well, to see how I'm scoring fights. We'll see if there's any late main card changes after weigh-ins, and what I'm seeing there. Right, cheers.